Okay, perfect. Well, welcome everybody. Thanks so much for joining. This is an especially exciting panel because it's all good news. But welcome to Austin Design Week. Obviously this year is a bit different, which honestly I'm pretty excited about. We all didn't have to find parking anywhere. You didn't have to fight traffic to get anywhere. But welcome. If you want to go to the next slide, only a couple things I wanted to call out. We've got events going on all week. And we also have a Slack workspace that I highly suggest everybody joins. It's a really easy way to continue conversations after a panel, to connect with anybody that you've met or to connect with panelists. And on top of that, on our website and on our social channels is an easy way to find out all of the other events that are going on. And then if you hit the next slide, we've got some great partners this year. Austin Design Week obviously is free for everyone to participate, and it's nonprofit. And so these are our amazing sponsors that help make everything happen and help us pay for our Zoom licenses and our website and all of the good things that make this possible. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to drop it in the chat. There will be a little bit of time right at the end for a quick Q&A, or if anybody has anything that they want to bring up, just flag it in there and I'll call it out. But without further ado, I'll pass it off to Robert.
Thanks, Grayson. And thank you everyone for joining Austin's Transit Moonshot, the making of Project Connect. I'm Robert Bowler. I'm a senior service and interaction designer at Fjord here in Austin. And I'm joined by three of the brilliant minds behind Project Connect. I'm especially excited because if you've been following Austin politics, both the Proposition A, which led to Project Connect, and Proposition B, which is more mobility stuff, both passed. So these will be coming to life soon. And without further ado, I will introduce our panelists. Jackie Nierenberg has served as a community engagement manager for Cat Metro since 2015 and leads the public participation effort for Project Connect. Before joining Cat Metro, Jackie was a senior consultant for local public involvement firm Group Solutions. She is a 2019 Transportation for America Fellow and has twice been featured as a presenter at the North American Conference of International Association for Public Participation, which has got to be the longest conference.
IAP2.
Jackie holds a master's in journalism from the University of Texas at Austin and made the city her permanent home in 2003. Thanks for joining us, Jackie.
Thanks. Good to be here.
Meg Merritt is a principal at Nelson Nygaard, where she leads the Austin office. She spent her early career in Austin at Cat Metro and in Washington, D.C. during the U.S. Department of Transportation's high-speed rail program. She returned to Austin in the tech sector, where she led mobility partnerships for the App Ride Scout removal. She is a co-author of the TCRP report that covers best practices in TNC transit partnership. Meg's thought leadership pieces have been featured in City Lab and the New York Times. Thanks, Meg. And Sharmila Mukherjee joined Cat Metro in November 2019 as the Executive Vice President of Planning and Development. She manages service planning, short-range planning, service analysis, regional transportation coordination, transit-oriented development projects, Cat Metro's Sustainability Office, and supports Project Connect. She is a certified planner and program manager with 20 years of progressive urban transportation planning and project management experience. Sharmila holds a master's degree in urban and regional planning from the University of Illinois at Chicago and a graduate certificate in traffic engineering methods from Northwestern University. Thanks, Sharmila. All right, and without further ado, Jackie, you want to show us what this project is all about?
Sure, Robert. Thank you all for having us here this evening. So excited to be here. It's been an amazing week for all of us, for Austin, hugely historic. And, you know, we've been here before. We have had referenda on rail several times, never could quite get it over the finish line. And we weren't sure this time, you know, with the pandemic, it really changed the calculus for people. And luckily, people were willing to invest, and it was a great thing because this is the time for us to be investing in our community. You know, we're going to put people to work. We're going to bring economic growth to the community. this is just the right time to do it. So Robert, next slide, please. I'll tell you a little bit about how we got here. So we started on Project Connect about 4 years ago. And many of you had heard about Project Connect before because we had a referendum go to voters in 2014 for a rail project, and that did not pass. But we learned a lot of lessons, and we got back together, regrouped 4 years ago, and began to engage with the community on this idea of building out a full system, not just one project, but a system that could serve everybody. And it began with our identification of corridors where this stuff belonged. And through the process, we coordinated with the city of Austin and a lot of our partner agencies, worked very closely with community groups. We had about 150 community organizations who were represented on our advisory committee, the Project Connect Ambassador Network. And, finally got to this point. But it all started with a problem, just like every good design solution starts with a problem. Sorry, Robert. Yeah, thank you.
I tripped over to say.
No worries. And the problem was that Austin, no matter how much people wished it wouldn't, is growing. And it's growing by leaps and bounds. And it has been growing for 15, 20 years already. In fact, our population is supposed to double by 2040. And we knew that the infrastructure we have in this city would not be able to keep our city mobile much longer. As a matter of fact, I think last year we all spent about 5 days of our lives in traffic, which is really sad to think about that wasted time. So even though it had been kicked down the road quite a few times, we have finally gotten to the point with our community where they realize, yes, this is a problem. Next slide, please, Robert. Thank you. One of the things that really set us up for success is that it just so happened that the city of Austin was embarking on its Austin Strategic Mobility Plan process, just as we were ramping up our effort to begin engaging and developing the plan for Project Connect. And that Austin Strategic Mobility Plan actually passed in April of 2019. And it sets sort of the policy framework for how mobility should develop in our city. So it really set the tone for us. And what the plan, the upshot, the main goal of this plan was to have our city be a 50-50 mode split on how we get around. In other words, 50%, okay, single occupancy vehicles, fine, but we want the other 50%. We expect the other 50% to become multimodal, transit, walking, carpooling, or other ride sharing, bicycle. And as you can see on the left, the chart shows what we are now, which is 74% of us drive alone in cars. And that's a problem when you don't have the space for all those cars carrying very few people. Next slide, please. So you may not think about community engagement as a design problem, but this was a pretty lofty and complex idea, especially in the very beginning as we were formulating the plan, talking about corridors and other things that people don't normally talk about or think about. And so we had some challenges on how do we get the community engaged. We do public meetings all the time. We get the same frequent flyers at these meetings all the time, and we love their input. We appreciate their involvement, but it's not a very diverse group. And so we needed to be able to connect with all kinds of people. So one of the challenges we had was we had to turn some complex and often dry ideas into simple, relatable ones. We wanted to translate planner speak into regular language. We wanted to be able to reach and get input from underrepresented communities that we never get to hear from. And often those are the communities that need transit the most. And we wanted to build trust and provide transparency with our engagement. And so we designed a community engagement plan that addressed these challenges. Next slide, please. We did so by adding fun to public meetings. Our first round of public meetings used the traffic theme, and they were called traffic jams. And we had music and we had food and we had activities for kids. Really made it a fun experience and tried to open it up to not just your regular transit nerds. We also tried to use applicable examples when we were talking about technical alternatives we were looking at. How do we make that more real for people? And Meg is going to show you in a minute what that looked like to make it relatable. Of course, using a lot of visuals was really important. You know, we have about 106 different languages spoken in Austin now, which is just astounding. And so we have limited English proficiency. We have different levels of understanding. And so visuals help us communicate with people much, much clearer. We also, in order to address the transparency and trust issue, we built what was called a community engagement dashboard and featured it prominently on our website so that people could follow along with how many people we were talking to, what the raw input we were getting was, and where our meetings and engagements were taking place. So we actually had a heat map that showed where those meetings were taking place, and you can actually see that on the Project Connect website now. And then we needed to take the public meeting to the people. We just could not expect people to come to us to talk about this wonky stuff. We needed to go to them and ask them the right questions in the right way. And so we developed a lot of different ways of doing that. One was we decked out one of our buses as an engagement bus, and it said, join the movement on the side. And we had all kinds of supplies in there to hold a mobile public meeting wherever we went. So we set up a table, we pull up the bus, set up a table, and ask questions of the folks that walked by. We tried to hit places that had lots of people gathered around, like Fiesta grocery store, for example, or a park, or any number of areas where people tend to be without meaning to bump into us. We did one, as a matter of fact, at the Hot Sauce Festival, and it was so hot that day. It always is at that festival. And we called it a cooling station and invited people to come in and cool off. And while they were in there, they became our captive audience and we got input from them. And then of course, we provided a lot of digital opportunities. That's something that became extremely critical to us. Back in April, we had our last round of public input meetings. So it was a really important time for us to hear from people on whether they were good with the system plan we were putting forward to the council and the board. So we had 11 of these public meetings planned throughout the month of April. All of them had to be canceled. And we pivoted, like everybody else, to virtual meetings and actually had a really good response with those. So those were some of the design solutions we used to try to connect with people and hear about what was important to them, and to just kind of explain what the heck it is we were doing with this thing called Project Connect. Next slide, please. And now I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Meg, who's going to tell you a little bit about communicating more clearly and how they did that.
Yeah, thanks, Jackie. So I saw somebody chimed in earlier from Europe who's interested how we sold this to Texans. And the truth is, we just had to do a lot of educating. As Jackie was showing, our historical mode split, absent, of course, 2020 is a bit of an anomaly, but our mode split was egregious and not able to ingest an additional 2 million people. So what we really put our heads together with the technical team, and the real game changer for Project Connect is that it came with a package of Transitways. So that was just a given. We knew that in order to accommodate the geometry that we needed and fit as many people as we can through an intersection, we were going to have to fundamentally change the way people get around with what we had. We have limited road capacity in central Austin. You really can't do a lot with that. And so we had to be more efficient. This diagram is one example of a little quick math exercise we did and put it into a Giphy that shows how many people you can get through an intersection on buses. A lot of skepticism about the project early on was, yeah, but the buses are empty. And that is just factually incorrect. The 801, the line that is currently on the Orange Line, or the Orange Line will be taking over the 801 corridor, had 11,500 people a day. And as a rider of that line who was left at the curb on more than one occasion, I can tell you it is a smash hit. So that capacity question was really something that drove a lot of the design. Next slide. Okay, so again, we're trying to understand and help Austinites understand what, like, help me, I cannot wrap my head around what this could look like. So we started really high level with diagrammatic looks at what it would look like, street level, elevated, and underground, all of which exist in systems all over the world, with the hope that it would help folks understand some of the trade-offs. Each of these design concepts has significant trade-offs. Street level being one, elevated gets a little more expensive, and of course underground is really relegated to the most constrained areas. Next slide. And then as time went on, we knew that we were going to have to help folks envision it even further. So those of you that have an architecture background are very familiar with rendering, and we definitely tried to use the skill sets of designers in this case to help us further envision what a system could look like, using a little bit of an ambiguous scale that is similar to Austin's, and the built form is similar to Austin's, retaining two northbound and southbound traffic lanes. What a lot of questions early on, like, well, what does a turning lane look like in this scenario? What does center running stations look like? As you can see here, the folks that are boarding and alighting the train cross to the side of the street that they want to go to using the cross section. And so Prop B, the bike and pedestrian bond, was really helpful in thinking through that. Go ahead, next one. Okay, so, and I'm also getting a question, was monorail. Yeah, in the beginning, like the entire realm of possibilities, all modes was considered. But given the constraints of the right-of-way, and given some of the criteria mathematically, there's all these little tipping points for which modes work the best. We really got down to two for orange and blue, and then also for the other corridors. So this is an example of a diagram that we put together to convey to the public the capacity of a BRT bus. And then if you go to the next slide, really quickly, this is an example of the capacity of a light rail train. The difference being that in light rail trains, you can put a lot of, you can couple the trains together to even further increase capacity. So those are some of the considerations. And then finally, if you go to the next slide, this was more on the abstract front, as people are envisioning the question of, well, how would this affect my life? Well, the reality is that when you have your own dedicated right-of-way, your travel time and your commute significantly decreases. And so we ran through a couple of exercises that try to convey that point to the public. Basically, how would it change in a car versus before? The difference, of course, being that a light rail won't be in traffic, so its travel time is significantly better. So we use these personas. That's an exercise that I'm sure many designers have gone through. We use sort of personas to take through some examples of what those trips may look like. And now Sharmila is going to talk a little bit about what's next now that it's passed.
Thanks, Meg and Jackie. So just wanted to kind of start by saying I've been in Austin for 1 year, and I came from consulting, working on delivering projects similar to Project Connect, and I was in San Francisco. So I see a lot of similarities in changing demographics and needs. I wanted to answer one of the questions that popped up early. I wanted to kind of answer that. That some of these are dated, and why are we going through this exercise now in the midst of COVID? And another question was about how did you get through and get this ballot passed in COVID? I think they kind of tie in together, and I think COVID is going to be measured in months, and this project, it's a generational investment. It took, as Jackie mentioned, it took multiple tries to come to this point, to come up with a great system plan. It's a generational investment. It's going to last beyond COVID. And yes, COVID would change the way that we are working right now. The experience we are having right now is facilitated by COVID for some of us. And I think a lot of it would stay on and would allow us to be more flexible. But I think the need for this stays on, and it's going to be fully realized in the next 5 to 10 years. So that's where I wanted to start first. Robert, my next slide. So this is the initial investment sequence, and this will give you a sense of what's happening right now and what are the project steps. So I would be going through that a little bit in some of the next slides, and then we can discuss that further if you're interested. So orange line and blue line, those are the two light rail, essentially arteries, two of them that I think Austinites would be using for a number of years. So there's a lot of interest surrounding that. But it's a system plan. It has Metro Rapid, BRT lines, Metro Express Park and Ride. It addresses commuter needs, as well as a lot of one of the most unique feature of this plan is this transit supportive anti-displacement measures, which also future-proof kind of the land use transportation connection, and it kind of creates a lot of safety mechanism for displacement and gentrification. Next slide, please. So for orange and blue line, we are, the next step is, and we are already preparing an INIT to some extent, preliminary engineering and NEPA environmental review, and wanted to talk a little bit about what NEPA is. It's the National Environmental Policy Act of 1970 that applies to all major new and expansion of infrastructure projects. And these are big investments. Both blue and orange line are significant investment for our community, and we expect about 40 to 45% of our funding coming from federal government. We feel the ridership is there, the need exists, and the demographic and the population doubling in every 20 years definitely would form the basis of kind of why we would be competitive. But there are a whole host of, there's a long list of criteria that gets applied and reviewed by FTA in approving a project to go into the next phase and to be able to be eligible in the full funding grant agreement. And NEPA is probably the biggest milestone in that. So environmental clearance for blue and orange is our focus, and then EIS is the most rigorous form of environmental review that that is possible, and that's what we would be going through to take these projects to the next phase of implementation. Next slide. And design, I know in this audience, you'll be very interested in how design will be driving our phase, our next phase. So besides engineering on both vehicle and station engineering, our design would be focused on equity, and it's going to be designed for, we'll be designing with all abilities in mind. User experience is going to be a part of it, amenities at station, onboard, fare media, some of the new technology updates regarding fare media, and then access and connections. I think that's where sort of the planning and design would come together. We would have to come up with a very good plan for first and last mile solution, have multiple modes come together in a seamless way for this system plan to work the way it's planned, and wayfinding and retail and other amenities as well. Next slide. Station area planning would take on a great deal of importance, and I think that's where a lot of the design activities that would take place in the next 6 months, more in the planning phase, and then in the next 2 years, more definitive design. That would be station area planning in context of larger corridor. You see a map that's kind of showing the most promising segment. That's where I think a lot of transit-oriented development would take place. Then we're going to be looking at innovative financing tools, value capture, and other ways that we can leverage TOD growth, and then support the funding that's already been approved under anti-displacement to kind of have a future of Austin that we can all be very proud of. There are some regulation changes that would need to take place. Station area zoning would need to be looked at, but it kind of gives you a feel for this NEPA process, that the NEPA review, environmental clearance, and preliminary engineering, how they would go hand in hand. And we would, as design goes on, and almost about, I would say about 20 to 30% of design would go alongside this environmental clearance process. And that is, we are going to be doing that in the next 1.5 to 2 years to complete and get the project into the funding process for FTA. Jackie? I think Jackie's taking over to talk about how you're going to stay connected and what's happening with Project Connect, how that's going to show up on the website.
Oh, you're on mute, Jackie. There we go.
You would think that by now, those of you that live in the community, we would love for you to get involved. If you have not been involved yet, please get involved. We've got so much engagement work to do with the community on everything from station design to public art on our infrastructure. And so to do that, you can visit us at projectconnect.com. And those of you that don't live in the area are welcome to visit us at projectconnect.com as well. And you can sign up for updates. You can sign up to be a recipient of our regular e-newsletter as well. And you'll learn all about the different projects that are in the program. You'll also learn about the new independent agency that's been set up to implement this program of projects called the Austin Transit Partnership. And we'll be posting opportunities to apply for the board of that independent body, as well as opportunities to become part of a community advisory committee for that body. So encourage you to visit us. There's a feedback email on projectconnect.com. It comes directly to me. So I assure you those emails do get read. We do listen to input. As a matter of fact, that anti-displacement fund was born from community feedback, and at one point was $100 million, and we worked with the community and social justice groups, and the council decided to raise it to $300 million, which is, by the way, the largest transit related anti-displacement fund in the country. So we're looking forward to doing something really historic with that. And with that, I will pass it along to Robert. I know we want to do some panel questions and answers now. So thank you.
Thank you all for that thorough overview. I'm going to get rid of this. And while it's transitioning, Grayson, are there any other questions popping up so far?
I haven't seen too many. I think one of the very first ones that I saw was why do you guys think that there's been such an interest, especially from the public, and the reason why this passed, especially because there was a lot of votes for it. And I guess what we were talking about, honestly, before this started is why now?
I'm happy to take a stab at that one. I think there were a lot of things that came together to make it happen this time around. For one thing, we were presenting the public with a fully connected system that had lots of different projects, from the micro transit option, which is our pickup service or circulator service that bridges that first and last mile, to the light rail line. So there's a lot in it. And I think that people were hoping for us to go big. I think people were very excited as well about the downtown tunnel and 3 underground stations that are part of the blue line and connect to the orange line. But also, I think people were just in pain in this community, having to deal with not being able to get to the places they wanted to go. And we're looking for somebody to do something. In fact, in our focus group discussions, we heard that very quote. It's like, we just want somebody to do something about this. So people were fed up. And then finally, Austin is a different place than it was in 2014. We have so many young professionals moving here from all over the world, and they're coming from places where they had robust transit options. They did not have to own a car, and getting here was a little bit deflating for people who were used to that, and not being able to rely on a fully built out transit system with high capacity transit options. So I think all of that came together to make it much more palatable to the community this time.
Great. We've tackled a couple of elephants in the room, like what mode, what vehicles were used in the program, how COVID affects it. I know there's another, and especially any designers who work in tech are pretty excited about autonomous vehicles as one mode. But Meg, I know you wanted to talk a bit about why, that's been brought up as some kind of panacea for our transportation woes. And I'm wondering if you, what thoughts you have on mode selection in general, but autonomous vehicles.
Sure. Well, look, I think as everybody that's worked in that sector has been well aware, they'll be here in 5 years, and we've been hearing that for 15. So while we wait in traffic, we kind of know from historic precedent and going back to that throughput example that there's a saying that technology can never overcome geometry. One of a famous transit practitioner wrote that. Who goes toe to toe, by the way, with Elon Musk on Twitter. And I encourage you to watch it. It's quite good. And look, I think autonomous vehicles hold a lot of promise for big gains for humanity. But what we had to think about, this is not just for Austin, this is kind of more holistic as a transportation practice, is going back to that picture I showed you guys, we might gain some efficiencies in what those little cars are doing, but a third to a quarter of them won't have anybody in them as they go pick up people. So we then lose efficiency. And we use a metric in transportation called vehicle miles traveled. VMT is sort of a KPI for output. And we expect VMT to go up with autonomous vehicles. Additionally, as we go through testing, there might be a scenario where we have a have and have nots lane. And we really can't have that. And as we look at transit, it's something that all of society can use and is in its own way future-proof. It's sort of a lane that guarantees that upward mobility that transportation provides for so many folks.
And I think I just want to chime in, and probably this is the third pylon, probably not necessary, but I just wanted to point out, I think what COVID highlighted for us as an agency and also for the region and some of our decision makers, that there's a great unmet need for transit in our community. Even in the midst of COVID, so right before COVID, we were about, our daily ridership was about 110, 120 somewhere. It was kind of varying in between. And then now we're half of that. But in the midst of COVID, with stay-at-home orders, we were about 48,000 a day. And that's not including the trips that were being served by Metro Access and some of our demand response trips. So when you take that into consideration, that all of these trips are essential, not everybody has the luxury to be able to work from home or telework, and they have to go to work, the healthcare, daycare, grocery store workers, and there's need for transit. Also, even if automated vehicle come in the next 2 to 5 years, it's still, I don't think it's going to take care of congestion in the way that we think it would, without very integrated planning. And judging from the examples that we see all around the United States with highly dispersed land use, that would be another tall task. So I really think all of those factors kind of were taken into consideration. And the reason I think this ballot measure passed is because Austin I think we have a general understanding now that this is the starter system. We're building a starter system, the bones of high capacity system that's really going to serve for a long time to come. And it is not some of the other measures that didn't pass. Those are probably another tunnel, and Transbay in BART was pushing forward with a second Transbay crossing, and that didn't go forward because, for obvious reasons. I don't want to waste too much time on that because it's add-on and it's based off of congestion. But I think we're not in that place. We just need the bones of our high capacity transit system in place.
I think you touch on something that I actually had lined up, is to ask, I mean, any good, designer or maker at all learns from their failings. So in short, Sharmila, what would you say from, I think you said you'd lived through a failed referendum before, and we've had them here in Austin. what are the things that were done differently to Project Connect?
So the personal lesson was I was a little bit more mature back then. And so, so that was in 2011, 2012. And it didn't pass because it was Michigan, and it's very auto-centric, and there were a lot of changes that were happening. But I think what Detroit couldn't do, Detroit region, I would say, they really could not get their decision makers to come together to see the bigger picture. And I think that's where Austin did a great job. And as I think this is a very good plan. Our system plan is very sound, but I think I give a lot of credit to our decision makers who were able to see that big picture and kind of go beyond COVID and look ahead and realize that this is probably one of the ways their kids or their grandkids are not going to move to New York after graduating. They would actually stay in the community. And it's kind of future proofing. I think we're talking about future proofing a lot today. So I think there's that. So I think the consensus around it and was incredibly well supported by the community. And I think Jackie and her team and City of Austin, they all worked so well together. Meg can give you a lot of those examples of how long and hard they worked together to bring this to fruition.
Thinking of future proofing, I know a lot of people are enamored with the AVs because they're new, but I don't think a lot of people notice that this part of this plan is it's going to be entirely electric, with a big, huge electric, bus charging fleet involved. And also that the rapid buses have literal lasers on them to talk to street lights to change. So if you want your future, it's actually baked into this plan here. There's a great question from Kristen about community engagement. And Jackie, I know you talked about community-driven design earlier. She says, I appreciate how you reimagine community engagement. What are the challenges you faced or are currently facing with community engagement in this new model? And is there anything you would do different if you were to do it over again?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, the thing about community engagement is it's never enough. It's just never enough. It's a moving target all the time. And we're constantly rethinking about how we're going to do things. We may have a series of engagements set up and we have them planned and designed all the same way, for example, but we realize, no, it's not going to work in this particular location or with this particular group of people. And often, on the fly, we'll make changes. What I would do differently, I don't know that I could, but I'm always wishing that we could engage more people who really need our service. We got more engagement towards the end, which is typical when people are about to vote for something. They get very interested in it. And in the end, we did get a lot of engagement, but not before there was a lot of misinformation that went around the community. And so it was a little harder to educate on the back end of this. So I'm still trying to figure out ways to get people involved and to reach out to those folks who really need to be involved in co-creation of services and helping us design amenities that make sense for them. I mean, after all, the system is primarily for the people who need it most. And we want to build it in a way that everybody wants to use it, but primarily it's for the people who need it. So I would say I'm always looking to do that better.
That's awesome. Maybe a good follow-up. Oh, sorry, Sharmila, did you have something?
No, I was just responding to one of the questions.
Oh, okay. Yeah, one of them on that community note from Rebecca, lots of conversation about changing community and new people expecting this. What thought has been given to the families and local culture for those families that have been in Austin for multiple generations, which is probably partly related to the 300 million transit or housing anti-displacement, but also can you talk a bit about how transit serves those types of families just by being transit?
Oh, well, for certain families who've lived in Austin for multiple generations, often in the same house that their parents and grandparents lived in, transit has just always been a way of life for people. The parents ride it, the children ride it. It's a lifeline. It's an absolute lifeline. And so you can understand their despair and concern when gentrification and rising property values and taxes start to threaten their ability to stay in place. And that means a lot of things. It means that they can't connect to the transit service they need anymore. Suddenly they have to have a car if they move out to, say, Pflugerville or Hutto or any of the surrounding communities that are less expensive to live in, but they still have to come here every day to work. And it costs about $10,000 to $11,000 a year to own a car, with all the expenses that come along with it. So transit is really deeply rooted in the families that have lived in Austin for a long time. And that's why I say that's what it's all about, that we want to serve them. And in order to do that and not add to the risk, that this anti-displacement fund, that's how it came to be. And, I think we're very fortunate that this is not just an opportunity to build a transit system in Austin, which is transformative enough, but it also gives us an opportunity to really start to rectify some of the wrongs that have been done to some of our communities who've been marginalized over decades. And displacement is one of them, and it's talk about a moonshot. It's a moonshot at trying to do something about that problem once and for all, and to do something about affordability. So yeah, I would say we're doing this for those families.
That's awesome. All right, I am an experienced designer by trade, so I am particularly invested in what it will be like to use this system as a writer. I know, Meg, you were talking about the work that y'all did in looking at comparing travel times because of the different modes and the density of that vehicle. And in particular, how this is going to be connected between not just, you're riding a train, but you're able to ride a shuttle to the train or a bike share to the bus. Can you talk a bit about how those connections make a difference in the experience?
Oh, sure. So with transit, the door-to-door is a little different than your car, right? You have to get to the transit line. And what we found in our industry in the last decade is that in making high capacity, high frequency connections on main corridors and providing a way for folks to get to that corridor or to that service, people will find a way to get there because the cost saving, the cost savings is one thing, but the time savings is so real. So Prop B is going to be a huge part of this. The city is going to simultaneously be investing in making those bike connections safer, so it feels a little bit more natural to bike to transit. Additionally, the sidewalk connections. I know in my neighborhood, I've gotten to see the 2016 bond come alive. And there was an intersection I would never have gone through on my bike 2 years ago that now is a place I frequent all the time because it just feels safe. And, it's really just a little bit of restriping and signaling that makes all the difference in the world. So I think that we'll see that really complement the work that's going on with Project Connect and make it feel more natural for folks. Then also there's going to be 9 new park and rides. So for folks that are not necessarily right near the corridor, there will be more opportunities to drive from your neighborhood and park at a park and ride to take transit into town.
Cool. Selfishly looking forward to that. Sharmila, actually, we've seen kind of all the different facets of how complex this project is. You have stakeholders within Cap Metro to even, get the designs out, and your partners. You have to work with the local decision makers. You have to work with the other stakeholder, which is all of the voters who had to approve this. So what is Cap Metro's strategy for running a project of this scale?
So that is something that we have been preparing for. Obviously, we were not sure of the outcome. No one was. We were hopeful that this would pass. And in preparation, there's, I don't know if you're following some of our, the recent progress made. in transit. So we have been focusing on our red line and improvements to red line, downtown station opening, Broadmoor Station in North Austin. We're also planning in collaboration with Austin FC, a new station at McCullough, a new McCullough station at Austin FC Stadium. And then we are working on, it's already well underway, is a red line optimization plan, which is basically looking at how to improve frequency service when ridership comes back. And we expect that ridership probably won't, on red line or commuter lines, won't come back until a vaccine is available, and it's going to be sometime next year. That's what we are thinking right now. But we are using this time to prepare for some of those things. We've already completed our positive train control. It's one of the first agencies in the country to be able to kind of go through that PTC certification process. It doesn't really mean a whole lot. It doesn't have a customer-facing component to it, but it's very important to go through that technical exercise and that certificate in place and have now all of our rail work follow that. And then two of our Metro Rapid lines, Expo and Pleasant Valley, that are part of Project Connect, those projects are entered into the project development phase with FTA, and we are very actively working on that with an incredibly ambitious schedule. And I would say that with orange and orange and blue line preliminary engineering and NEPA in Expo and Pleasant Valley, BRT moving forward into design and implementation. That would be enough for any agency, but we also have planning for our pickup, our demand response zones. We're kind of studying 15 zones right now to see how they would support when the lines come in together. Capri Map did a great job in sort of increasing our ridership, looking at the demographic conditions and kind of matching our service, but it also left some gaps. And we understand that. And just with anti-displacement measures, we are trying to kind of correct some of the historic inequities. We are also trying to understand the gaps that's left behind from Capri Map and how to fill in those gaps better. We would be looking at our feeder route to see how they would better serve Project Connect routes. So all of those we are working on simultaneously with our great consulting team partners and moving forward as we figure out the governance for Austin Transit Partnership.
Cool. Well, we're coming up on, I want to leave enough time in between sessions, but last questions for the whole panel. Is there any part of the plan in particular or step of development that you are most excited about, even if it's a step that we've already passed? Maybe Jackie, you started off.
Oh, I'm so excited about that downtown tunnel. I just can't wait to see that mini subway here. And, you know, it adds placemaking opportunity for the city. It's, you know, an opportunity to have public art and local vendors, and it just creates another gathering space, and it just makes this so much more real. I'm really excited about that part of the project.
I'll go next. I'm most excited about my kids will be teenagers when it's or preteens whenever service is up and running, and I really look forward to kind of slow dripping them learning how to drive because they'll have another option. So that's probably what I'm looking forward to most.
So mine's is a little bit of a spin-off of Meg's. I am an avid transit user. I am not the best driver. I mean, I drive just fine, but I always like to rely on transit. And I think this really, it's just a very exciting time. And we understand some of the gaps in the chat. There are a lot of different comments that are coming up, how we are going to address that. I think I'm also excited, in addition to sort of the final outcome and how we would be able to sort of see transit come together and help this community be a better Austin. I'm really excited to be able to bring the technical resources that we have and kind of do a meaningful NEPA process, it really should take into account the short-term construction impacts, the longer-term construction impacts, to make sure our businesses are, I mean, we hear them and kind of address all of the concerns and issues in a meaningful way in the design process. So I also look forward to kind of working on that.
Stellar. I'll end with an anecdote. A while ago, I was going to an event and I had locked up my bike at the event next to someone else who was going, and they said to me, "Oh, you have so much bicycle parking here." And I was like, "Where are you from?" And she was from Sweden, and I was like, "It'll be nice someday for there to ever be anyone complaining about that there's not enough room for their bike because there's too much, people riding transit and using bikes and more equitable and sustainable forms like that." So it hit me really hard to see that the whole city or much of the city supported this, and that within a measurable amount of time we'll have a city like that. So thank you, Jackie, Sharmila, Meg, for your time and for your 4 years of work on making this project a reality. Thank you, all attendees, for your time this evening. Enjoy Design Week. Make sure to check out the website and see any of the other events that you're interested in.
Awesome. Thanks so much, guys. And thanks everybody for joining this event. Just a reminder, this is just day 2 of Austin Design Week. So we have plenty of events just like this all throughout the rest of the week. All of them are free. All of them are online. So I certainly hope I get to see you in some of the other ones. And if you want to try and connect after this panel, go ahead and join our Slack workspace, and you can find other attendees, and sometimes you can find panelists and hosts in there. And it's just a great place to connect that's not LinkedIn. Great. Well, thank you guys. Have a great night.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
All right, thanks everyone.
Bye.